Good to go? Commissioner Lee? Commissioner Ivey? Good to go? Hello, welcome to our meeting of the Utah County Board of Commissioners. As usual, we'll begin by looking to those who are with us for a volunteer to share a prayer, reading, or thought, and someone to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. There's someone to lead us in the pledge, and any other volunteers? If not, I'm happy to do it today. Oh, Richard, you'd like to come up here? Okay. Please. Yes.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are thankful for being here, being able to participate in these proceedings and be able to witness the government at work. We ask Thee to please inspire all those that are going to be presenting and speaking and help them be able to speak their mind and be able to do so in an effective and helpful manner. We ask Thee to please help us all in these somewhat troubled times around us, that those that will be expressing their opinions both here and also outside of this building this evening will be able to do so in a peaceful manner, and that no one will be harmed. We thank Thee for this wonderful day, and we say these things in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We'll go through the process of building our agenda. Anything that we do not hold for discussion will be approved on the consent agenda. Does anyone have anything on the consent agenda to hold?
I did not.
Okay. Moving to the regular agenda.
Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, there was a discussion about pre-authorizing the Public Works Director to approve the change order referred to in 10 on consent. I don't know if you wanted to engage in that sort of a discussion. So we're 10 on consent is to agree, basically to pay the costs of the signal on this Woodland Hills Drive. We don't know the exact cost yet, but you could pre-authorize Richard Nelson to approve that up to, the recommendation was $400,000. If it's over that, perhaps bring it back on commission. But
That was the latest modification we had in our email, correct, Richard?
that element's not part of the agreement, so you'd have to make it part of the motion, I guess, or part of the.
So that mean we hold this item, or or is it on consent with that note?
If you'd like that to be on consent with that note, you'd have to.
I'm fine with it being on
Sure,
consent
okay.
with that note.
Okay, on consent, thank you for noting that, Paul. Back, anything on regular agenda to hold? I'd like to hold 8 for discussion.
Hold number 1, and if we could we table number 2 until we have a presentation, and then afterwards, or after our closed meetings.
I would have 10 as a strike.
Strike item number 10. I'm okay with that. I'd hold number 14. and I think that's it.
On number 11, just a note on there, in 11A2, the or should be after the subsection A, not subsection B. If that could just be changed, I don't know who's. Ralph.
Ralph?
It's just a grammar thing, but if you're fine with that, okay.
Is that a, just trying to figure out if we should pull this up.
You can hold it, go through it if
The
you want.
policy is not, I guess, really in there. 11,
11A2.
oh, 2A2, I think.
A2.
Okay. I think that's just Roman numeral 2. This emergency paid sick leave, is this where you're looking?
Yeah, I can pull it up. I just have a
Apply to
note on it.
emergency responders.
Want to look down through it. The or should be after subsection A, not subsection B.
Oh, no, just a very small graph. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
or should be after B instead of A. Yeah, okay. I'm fine with that change.
Yeah, it's,
And so that's just noted again on consent. Okay, anything else to hold?
Nope, you got 14, okay.
we're at 14. That was the last one I had. So.
Okay. So that takes us to regular agenda item number 1. Adopt a resolution establishing the 2020 tax rate levies for Utah County.
Josh, do you have that rate for us?
Yeah, sure. So if you look in your packet, there's a table and also the resolution. Just kind of as a reminder of how the process works, the Board of Commissioners adopts a budget, and part of your budget adoption process includes creating essentially a revenue target. If that revenue is going to be above the certified rate amount of revenue, then the commission is required to go through what's commonly known as the truth in taxation process, which was followed this past fall. And the revenue amount that was adopted then creates a data point, so to speak, in the creation of the tax rate. So at this point, you adopt the tax rate for this year, and the tax rate that's been calculated by the Utah State Tax Commission is reflected in the highlighted portion there, where it says the 2020 calculated tax rate. And then there's the 2020 proposed tax rate. So essentially you're adopting that tax rate, which is designed to create the budgeted revenue as adopted in the 2020 budget.
Okay.
I'd be ready to make a motion.
I'd like to, I think there might be some people here from the community that like to speak to it. I'd like to give them an opportunity to do so, if they'd like to. Anybody from the public that want to speak to it?
It's like we're ready for a motion.
Then I'd like to speak to it. A lot has happened from when we first looked at this. Along the way, we've got a coronavirus that happened. We've got elections that happened, and so I find it interesting that we're still considering this at such a high rate. I mean, we've got a lot of citizens and businesses that are struggling right now in a certain sense, and I'm concerned about us about the county government flushing ourselves out, with monies, and so with that, I would hope that we consider it different. I know that even with the election that went through, there was a bunch of campaign promises that were made, And so I'm wondering if we're truly representatives of our citizens and of the people, how we view this. It seems like there was a lot of talk on this during the process, and even a vote that was taken, with this included. And so when we talk about being representatives of the people, I think that we need to listen to the people. I know when we had our truth and taxation meeting, there was some comments made. Well, you're not necessarily representative of the county, and then there was a group that went out there and did a referendum. That wasn't representative of the county apparently, and now we've got an election, and I'm wondering if that's even a representative of the county. Not sure. I think it is. I think that that this needs to personally be scrapped, and we need to start over and try to find out where we're at with this, because there's a lot going on. Even with the CARES Act, you can look at good or bad, or fortunate or not with that. There's monies that the county can use, and I'm hoping that we use them in an appropriate way, and not just use them in frivolous ways that can really be a benefit to Utah County and Utah County citizens now and into the future. And so I would hope that that's the reason why we go through this process. A lot's happened, and I think it's time that we listen to the people.
So, Commissioner Lee, when you describe this group of people or the referendum or exactly what you're referring to, what would you say is the position on the right amount of revenue to raise?
Well, I think that's a discussion that we need to have, and
Because
my
because
fear
because
is that this that we're not going to listen to the people, and we're just going to possibly, I don't know your minds, but I'm wondering if this is just going to be rammed through, and then it'll have to be looked at when there's another commissioner possibly.
So the interesting thing about this process is that ultimately in your final budget, during the budget process, which I have here in front of me, you recommended $16 million of new revenue. That's the amount that we needed to have to fund our budget. And ultimately where we were at was 19 million. And so if you're still where you were at back then, I think there's a conversation to be had. Like, the circumstances have changed a little bit. And so are you still where, because that's what's interesting. That's one of the things that's been lost in this whole discussion, is that when you actually look at the budget that we passed versus the budget that you proposed,
You passed.
we as a commission passed,
Yep.
Versus the budget that you proposed, if you go line by line, department by department, that budget actually spends less in each department than your budget. You proposed more spending. I mean, they're pretty much the same, but slightly more. The difference is, the reason why there was the 19 and you were at 16, that all goes to one-time items like risk management, like capital projects, like building up the reserve, and then the restricted fund. But if you get it out of those items, the actually line-by-line approvals, we were essentially the same. You were slightly more with the spending. And so I think that's important for everyone to know and to realize. And so if you still want to fund all those departments like you did when you in the December budget, then we can move forward with that. I do think that some of these changes have maybe reduced some of the pressure on those one-time items, depending on how we manage some of the CARES Act dollars.
Yeah, well, my proposal is that we scrap this and start all over. Instead of starting with an idea of building a tax rate increase to potentially starting off at 127% and then trying to come down with it, that we start all over and maybe go back and say, you know what, let's scrap this whole thing and start with a mentality of what are we going to do to refine back, instead of going forward. I know you put that out there, but you have to realize the dynamics with it is that you go through a process of putting a tax rate in there, and then that becomes the budget, and you have to work within the budgeted numbers. And so, you know, that false dilemma that you're putting forward on that thing is unbelievable to me, because what I was proposing was significantly less than the 19 million. It turned out to be about 8.3.
It was a $16 million tax increase. Your budget was a $16 million tax increase.
I was working, okay, I'm not gonna go into the minutia of that, because there's more to it than just saying, looking at the tax increase and looking at the tax increase itself and what was passed at that time, and then looking at a budgeting cycle of how you fit it. So just because, and I voted against that tax rate increase, but
Yeah, but-
nevertheless, it was passed, and because it was passed, then you turn right around, and now you have to work within a budget. I have to work within the parameters of the budget.
In the
even
in the
though
budget
even though I
cycle,
voted
you
against it.
approved, you supported a tax increase. During the budget process, you said that you support a tax increase. Once you finally realized that the sheriff ICE contract was a bunch of baloney, and that you weren't going to be able to sell the park, right? Which I don't think we've made any progress on. You said, yes, I would support raising the taxes to fill those holes. So,
8.3.
well, you said you would fund 8.3 million increase, but that still had the park. And I think it might still had ICE in it. And so then you acknowledge that those were not going to ever fund the budget.
No, that was not in there, because I was down at the 3 million, and then I said, okay, with the $4.5 million with the sheriff's budget, then we took that up, and that came out to about the 8.3. And so, again, when you pass something as a commission.
But then the park, what about the park? You still had revenue coming in from selling the park.
Correct. You did.
Right, I had revenue coming in, because
And-
that was
and-
supposed to be the offset.
And,
That was
and,
part of
and
the
we
offset.
talked about having that done before we set this rate. And have you been able to come up with an agreement to sell that park?
Listen, the thing is you guys stopped that completely.
Nobody
Oh
stopped
my
it, Bill.
gosh.
Yes, you did.
No, we
I mean,
didn't.
you're
Bill, I
out
am
there-
so
you're-
sick and
you're
tired
out-
of your
you know,
lies.
You're out there saying over and over that I was putting it towards salary, which is a complete lie, absolute complete lie.
Bill, here's the harsh reality. We have a budget with expenditures that you agreed to. You agreed to
I
all
did not
those.
agree to it. I voted
Bill,
against
you
it.
agreed to all
I
those new.
voted against
Bill,
it.
you agreed to all
Where did
those
I
new
vo-
attorneys.
Where did I?
You voted for. You agreed to all those new attorneys.
Where
You-
in this budget did
You
I
agreed
vote
to
for?
all. You got to pay for the stuff you vote
I've
for.
got
Bill.
your budget right here. Bill Lee's proposed budget.
It's a proposal to have a conversation on where we're at and what we can go down through.
Wait, are
It
you
is
saying
not a vote.
you did not support your own budget proposal?
Oh, Tanner, come on.
No, hold on. That's what you're kind of
Seriously.
saying. Are you saying you did
Seriously.
not support your own budget proposal?
You know what you do, Tanner? You put ideas on the table for discussion and conversation, and that's what I did. I took your proposals, and then I went down through it and said, wait a second, I don't think we should do that. Maybe we should go here. This is what we should do.
Okay, so you are saying you did not support your own budget proposal.
What I'm saying, Tanner, is that when you have conversations on the table, you put them out there as conversation, and then you come to a document in which you vote. We came to a document in which we voted on, and I voted no.
Okay, so that's great. You did
That
not
was not
support
my
what you
proposal.
proposed.
That was not my proposal. That was your proposal. You were the architect for the budget that we have in place right now.
The one we passed, okay, fair, but the one that you proposed, that was your proposal.
Conversational proposal is what we put out there so we can have discussion on it, and that's the way this legislative process works.
Okay, I mean, that doesn't make any sense, but it's helpful to know
I
your
just want to
position,
know:
so.
Are you going to listen to the people on this thing? I mean, last night was pretty resounding. I don't know if anybody else watched it or not, but I was shocked at the numbers. I mean, this election turned out to be about that issue, and probably the change of form of government. Those were the two issues. Resoundingly, the county came forward on this and said, nope, we don't want to go that direction. I mean, you're going to do what you're going to do, but I just want to let you know that I'm not in favor of this, and I don't think the new commissioner coming in, so we can go down through this process for half a year, and we can argue and squawk about it, but change is going to come.
Well, there's one thing that I just want, And all it is, we can disagree. I just want you to be honest.
Oh, I want you to be honest, Tanner. Holy smokes.
Well,
Holy cow.
well, the
Really?
budget that you propose from this is your budget proposal. And so, like, to act like this is the problem is we could have been having a conversation about what the right amount of revenue to raise was. And ultimately, you started at 0, which would have been completely irresponsible, and it would have continued your path of deficit spending for the 4th year in a row. And ultimately, and that allowed you to kind of be the hero in public meetings. 'cause
I
you could
always
say-
start at 0 when you're at
were against.
127% tax rate increase.
But then ultimately you arrived at, and the weird thing about that is, again, you approved more spending than I did. And so there's no way of getting around that. If you're going to approve more spending, you got to find a way to pay for it.
I
And so
think the
that's
budget is the ultimate.
That's the honesty issue.
ultimate vote in spending, and I voted no, and you voted yes. How do you jump past a 19% spending increase?
Bill, did you vote to approve the increase in the county attorney's office and employees? That was our single.
No, you're going back to
No,
these
yeah, we are,
dynamics
because that's the
of this
reality of
whole
our
thing.
budget is that we voted, you and I voted, to put, I believe the exact number was 12 new attorneys in our county attorney's office because we both agreed that that attorney's office was significantly understaffed and was failing to protect the rights of the citizens of this county as a result of the unreasonable caseload that they were carrying. And so we voted to do that. That was the single largest budgetary increase that we had to pay for. The next thing that you concurred with was that in our elections division, we had to make significant improvements. And you agreed that we needed to spend and invest in our elections division. You sat and you voted with me, even though we were somewhat hesitant on the program, the $3.5 million for our new HR software. We have to pay for things.
You also supported
Yes.
more spending on the public defenders. And you advocated pretty strongly for that.
Right, but I'm telling you
You
right
wanted
now,
to keep Miss Utah County
the-
pageant.
the
I mean,
citizens.
you wanted to sit there and fight for the STEM educator position, which was more money.
So-
You
so-
wanted to hire your own political campaign staff as our PIO for 100,000 plus.
Oh, come
and
on.
We went to
Come on,
50,000.
Nathan. Holy cow.
And so the reality is, Bill, is you have no problem wanting to spend money, but you have a problem wanting to pay for it.
And I could not get you, Nathan, one single bit to turn around and have management when we lost $4.5 million in revenue, and we can't hold a line. Where were you when we're
was your
talking
pro-
about
what-
that stuff?
What $4.5 million?
I'm talking about the sheriff's ICE contract over the
What,
years.
what proposal did we ever have before us from you to,
It came forward every year.
never put forward
Every
a single
year we had
proposal,
that
Bill.
conversation.
just
but
like
there
you
was
haven't
never
in the
anybody.
last month, 8 months?
Don't talk to me about
Hey, hey,
proposals. You
hey.
never showed up during the budget process.
The hell I
There
didn't,
was
Bill.
no proposal that you
The
put
hell I
forward
didn't,
at all.
Bill. I didn't miss a meeting. Both of us
I'm
have
not
better
talking about a
attendance
meeting.
than you
Where was
do.
your proposal?
Both of us have better
Where
attendance
was
than you
where,
do.
where was your
Bill,
proposal?
both of us have the facts. Don't
Zero
lie.
proposal. Never showed up.
because I
mean,
showed
the
up
clerk
to the
auditor's
pu-
office told me that you spent maybe 15 minutes in their office talking about the budget.
Because I worked through my departments just like I was supposed to. Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
2 of us on this board have a better attendance record than you.
You know, that's the biggest bunch of. Let's have an attendance record, Nathan, in which
Let's,
you're
Bill.
actually here
Let's,
and
Bill.
not on the phone. I mean, we had a fire in South County, and you were nowhere to be found
Yeah,
for
I
a
was
month or so
gone.
ago. You were gone.
For a
the
week and a
fire's
half.
sitting here raging,
For
and
a
you're
week and a
nowhere
half,
to be found.
I was gone on a pre-planned trip, and the fire broke out after I left. And I spoke with Peter and the leaders of Woodland Hills every single day.
So
Yeah,
back to the
this-
budget issue.
this
So,
is-
so Bill, are you,
this is unbelievable.
are you going to, but just back to the, just being open and transparent.
I just want to make. You never even answered the question. Are you going to listen to the voters of Utah County or not?
I'm going to call the question.
Well,
All right,
but
question's
so
called.
so Bill,
Let's have a vote on it. The
Bill,
question's been called.
Are
wanna-
you
I don't think you know
going
what
to
a question
deny, are
being
you going
called
to
means.
deny that your budget proposal spent more money on each department than the one we passed?
You are mixing the issues, Tanner. I think the question's been called. We should scrap this whole thing and start all over.
So what does that actually practically mean? What does that mean for this year's budget?
We're gonna have to get down and we're gonna have to figure out what's gonna go on. But either way, the question's
The
been
guy who
called.
hasn't proposed a single cut in 8 months. It's all political rhetoric from you, Bill.
Nathan, you pulled that stunt just to have a political stunt. We all know it.
No, I
Everyone
didn't.
knows it. Everyone knows it was a stunt.
No, it wasn't, Bill.
It was one of the biggest political stunts I've ever seen.
Absolutely was not. I made a commitment to do it, and I followed through with the commitment.
Well, how come you never followed through with the rest of the departments then? Why have you not followed through with the rest of them?
I put forward them.
Well, but Bill, I would say that the burden to come up with cuts falls much more firmly on the person who's advocating against tax revenue or a lower tax revenue. And so if that's going to be your position, that's what I mean when I talk about integrity, is you cannot decouple these two issues. If you're going to be against a tax increase, that's a perfectly reasonable position to have, as long as you couple it with cuts in the budget. And that's what we've just been asking for.
You know, I've got a text message from Commissioner Ivey after our Truth in Taxation. Still have it on my phone.
Yeah.
And it says, you know what, Bill, I agree with you. That $8.4 million seems reasonable and logical. That's,
Yeah, I agree. I texted you and thanked you for working with us to try and reach a reasonable solution.
and that was
'Cause I was
reasonable
shocked,
and
'cause it's one
logical.
of the rare
but
times you
obviously
do.
it's not. You
It's
know,
one of the rare times you tried.
if you even showed up, it would be helpful.
Bill, I did
Let's-
show
let's,
up.
So hold on, but now, today, do you think that's reasonable and logical?
The increase?
The 8.4 million?
I think that should be on the table for discussion. Absolutely be on the table for
Okay,
discussion.
and that was also counting on
See,
selling the park, so that gets you to 16 million.
No. Oh my gosh, Tanner. No.
Hold on,
No.
what
I
exactly
don't-
is your
I
objection to
mean,
that?
10 and 8.4 by math doesn't make 16 either. So I don't know where you're getting that from. 10 and 8 make 18.
Oh, because you
But,
think
you know,
10, no, you actually
I don't know where
revised.
you're going. You're saying
you
10
revised-
and
You
8, so now
revised
we're
your
at
park.
16.
Let me clarify, you revised your park value that you thought you could get 8 million for it.
Wow, again, those were discussionary points. We've got a lot of water underneath the bridge on this. The citizens have come out, and the citizens have said, let's do something different. And I'm saying, let's do something different. And I'm in favor of doing something different. But you know what? I know what this is all about. This is you know, we're just kind of positioning and posturing. We got some sour grapes going on, and the vote's going to happen. So still, no one's ever said if they're going to follow what the citizens of this county wanted.
But what does that mean? That's the thing is that's so easy for you to be opposed to it, but I'm asking, I actually tried to have a reasonable conversation here about, what about the proposal that you did, right? I mean, here you're saying that you're kind of listening to the people, you're representing this group of people.
I'm saying scrap my proposal, scrap your proposal. Let's start all over.
Okay,
Let's
but,
start.
okay, I just want to, in case anyone cares, the challenge with that is that we set the budget. That is the process. You set the budget. So we're already 6 months in to our budget. And this rate is paying for this budget, right? So you can't isolate these conversations. You have the rate conversation at the same time you have the budget conversation. So you had a budget in December. If that still makes sense, that spending budget.
Yeah, null and void now. I mean, it's null and void on so many different levels. And so,
So that's, look,
at-
I just
at-
wanted
at
to be
this-
clear
at
that
this
if
point-
you
at
wanted
this
to
point
lower
in
the
time-
rate,
At this point in time, I've listened to the citizens of this thing, and even that proposal that I put forward there, I'm not in favor of it. Let's just put it that way. Is that what you're thinking? Is that what you're saying?
yeah.
Okay. At this point where we're at now, that juncture, we're past
So
that.
even
We're
if we
so
could,
far
even if
past
we
that
could have
now.
met you at your
It would
proposal,
have been a whole different conversation. I'm telling you right now, if we would have had that discussion back then, and I'm not saying that my proposal would have been the one that would have went through, it would have been a discussion in which we would have had, we probably would have never had a referendum, you know, put forward to us, and we would have been looked at as a reasonably stepping instead of just blatantly going all the way to the end, and we would have had a whole different conversation. We wouldn't even be here today. And Nathan, you probably would have sailed through an election.
well, So there's one person who didn't try to balance the budget starting in October, and that was you, Commissioner Lee. So let's just be very clear. In that first meeting, I asked you several times if there was one penny, $1 that you would support, and you said no. And that was the roadblock to trying to have this conversation. You're right? And then today I'm trying to reach a compromise position. And I'm saying, let's go back to the proposal that you put on the table in December. And now you're saying, no, I'm still starting back at zero. And so I think that really has left us in a position where
Let's
there's
make this
no
very
serious
clear.
conversation to have.
That zero that I said, if we're going to start at zero, is because we were starting at 127%, which to me was unbelievable, that we would engineer and architect a tax increase of that level without ever seriously going through and looking at potential cuts and efficiencies. It was all engineered to go for as high and as much as possible. That's the reason why I started at zero. Now, obviously, I didn't stay at zero, and obviously, you didn't stay at 127%. So that's the legislative process in which we go through.
But today you don't have a number. You just want to go back to where we were in 2019 and back to our deficit patterns. You're starting again at zero? Is that what you're saying? That's your negotiating style, or that's how you want to work?
Well, I'm saying that we need to scrap this and start all over and find out where we're at. And I'm not even saying that we start at zero and we don't have any increase to it. I say we look at what we can do and what has been mandated to us from the citizens, and hopefully bring them along through the process as well.
And just to get a sense for whether this is real or if it's just political rhetoric, since this is our statutory deadline to do this, kind of like last time, it was our statutory deadline, have you had any conversations with me or Commissioner Ivey about your intentions or what you would like to do prior to this meeting?
You mean in the sense of trying to
Try to work out, what rate you'd like to propose?
because you guys are stuck on where you're at. I mean, there's been no movement at all in that direction.
Okay.
I mean, I've wondered why this meeting is actually after the election. I've asked why we didn't have this before, why it's taken this long to get these numbers, and I've walked down through that process with BOE, and I'm comfortable. I know why those things are happening, but where do we sit down in a meeting and have that conversation? Again, it's unbelievable that we're at this point, but here we are. Yeah, come on.
Julie Blaney, Payson. I'm astounded today. I am astounded by the total deafness of some of the county employees, elected officers of this county. Even back when we had that truth in taxation hearings, the economy was pretty good. I mean, the disaster hadn't happened to the people yet, but here today, and our economy is suffering so greatly, the people are suffering, and two of you are prepared to just say, all right, you people, figure out how you're going to pay for it, because we want to spend the money. And we are spending the money, and we intend to spend that money. And we're not interested in finding out how to cut the budget. What have you done to try to cut the budget while the whole economy, every business in this county that you have jurisdiction over has suffered through this? Guys, come on. Hear the people. The people spoke loud and clearly. 23,000 people signed a referendum to put it on the ballot, wanted a say on just voting yes or no on this increase. That didn't happen. And now an election, and the people again spoke loud and clear. They're not in favor of this. They're suffering. Where's the talk about what can we do in the county to save the people money? That's the conversation that should be happening. And you know it.
Okay, thank you. I did want to point out a few other things that have changed since that budget hearing. One is, we talked about some legal liabilities. We did not set enough aside. Now we know that we have truly multi-million-dollar exposure in some legal liability that has become a little bit more clear about what that amount is. And it's higher than what we had in our budget. So that's a negative pressure on our budget. Secondly, the state has not been able to fund a number of things due to COVID-19. And so we have a higher burden. Now, one of the public defender grants that the state was paying for is falling out. And that puts an additional burden on the county budget. The Medicaid expansion is projected to have a shortfall, which my understanding is that that is still the case, and we didn't really budget for that. And then, of course, we still have the capital projects needs. So a lot of those, just, when we talk about that really large tax increase, and by the way, the county attorney's office has still not stopped asking for the capital defense funding and other funding that was included when we built up to that 100% amount. We ultimately decided, let's not pass that 100%, and we came down. But some of those liabilities and those pressures on the budget that we talked about that got it up to that first amount, they're actually coming to reality. And the county has obligations that we have to meet. So I'd entertain a motion.
Move that we adopt the 2020 tax rate levied for Utah County as stated in regular agenda item number 1.
Okay, I'll suspend the rules and second that motion. We have a motion and a second to adopt the tax rate as stated in regular agenda item number 1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes. Oh, all opposed?
Aye.
That passes 2-1.
I'd like to note that we are against the statutory deadline for setting the rate. I would note that we are at the statutory deadline for setting the rate. So scrapping and starting over is.
Okay, we're tabling number 2. Okay, item number 8.
Ralph Barnes, Human Resources. So this agenda item is a proposal from Soltis. Soltis is the advisor on our 401k plan. They made a proposal to the investment committee to manage what is called Goal Maker, which is an asset allocation function of Prudential's website. There is no expense to the county for this. The employees who choose to enroll in this service would be the ones actually paying the fee. There's about $46 million of assets in that service, asset model, and the annual cost of that would be approximately $27,000 to the participants in the plan. Again, that's something that's not paid for by the county. So employees could choose whether or not they wanted to make use of this service. The committee voted that they wanted to make a recommendation to you that they felt this was a good service for employees to provide, because it is a choice. I do have Tyler on the phone from Soltis. I'd like him. I don't know if you can hear me, Tyler. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can, Ralph.
Okay, great. If you could, jump in and fill in some of the blanks that I may have left.
I just have questions. I don't know if everyone needs an overview.
Okay.
But so a question that I have is, currently Prudential provides this service at no charge.
That is correct.
Is that correct?
Mhm.
And then Soltis offers, as part of the agreement, which we pay them for, they offer retirement advice and investment advice to county employees as it relates to their retirement account.
Yes.
And so
Correct.
I feel like, and Prudential obviously gets compensated one way or another. And so the deal kind of is, Goalmaker is an automated way of providing advice. In some ways, that actually takes the burden off of Soltis. You can either sit down with an employee, or you could manage it after they do their automated choices. And so I don't really understand why there would be an additional fee justified.
It's a very good question.
Yeah, and I'm happy to help answer that. So the way that Goalmaker works is within the plan, what we've tried to do is build an investment menu that allows the participants, for those that feel comfortable in going in and building their own investment portfolio, we've tried to build a comprehensive menu of investment options that a participant can do that, and they can go in and choose and pick their own investments. In the plan, if a participant does not feel comfortable in doing that, if they don't feel comfortable, Prudential will say, kind of do it for me, have my portfolio managed for me. And so as they do that, that's where Goalmaker comes in. And what Goalmaker does is then a participant, it just simply has them go through a few questions, and then Prudential will build a portfolio and allocate and do the asset allocation for that portfolio, utilizing the investments that are in the plan, but the allocation is built by and managed by Prudential. And the reason that we propose this is under the way that the plan works, Soltis is a fiduciary on the plan, which means we have to act in the participant's best interests. And so, whereas Prudential is not. And so, maybe a way to kind of say this would be, when Prudential builds their asset allocation, from our standpoint, where we do this every day, you can definitely recognize that part of the allocation, when they drive it, is to drive revenue to Prudential. In other words, they will put higher percentages in the portfolio to products in which they make more money.
So
And
I just want to,
ultimately-
let me jump in there for a second. Right now,
sure.
the Goalmaker services that you would offer, we're talking about the exact same investment funds, right? You have already helped the county select a group of funds, and that's what's available through the Prudential 401k plan. And
That's
so,
in the menu, correct? Yep.
and so whether Prudential is managing the Goalmaker or whether you're managing the Goalmaker, only the exact same funds are even available for those
Correct.
investments. Okay, so square that with what you just said about how Prudential would push people into more favorable products for Prudential.
So the allocation of those portfolios, this is where the difference of us running Goalmaker versus Prudential. Right now, Prudential, when a participant opts into that, Prudential builds the asset allocation. So I'm just going to use their stable value because that's one of the more prominent. If you were to look across the asset allocation portfolios driven by Prudential, you'll see their stable value product, which is one of their highest margin products. It makes up 10, 20, 30, even 40% of some of the portfolios. And so it's clear that, when Prudential is doing that, there's a revenue element that they're looking at. And so Soltis's value in this is to build an asset allocation that is not driven towards revenue, but actually driven towards better performance of the actual portfolios in Goalmaker. And that's an analysis that we ran. I'm not sure if that was provided to the committee, but on a 1-year, 3-year, and 5-year basis, and these are real numbers because we do this for other plans that are at Prudential, so we could give you real returns. We're looking at excess of around, on each one of those time periods, more than $1 million of better returns over those time periods because of the asset allocation decisions that Soltis makes versus Prudential.
So I'll just note that is on, the supporting documentation that's on the agenda item.
I mean, I'll just speak for myself. I think that there's not much of a difference here, in my opinion, since we're talking about the same underlying investments that Soltis has already helped us select. And so I'm fine if we want to turn that responsibility over to Soltis versus Prudential. It doesn't matter to me who does that. It would be helpful. I don't know if county employees were surveyed on this. They were not, right?
No, they were not. This
And
was
so
made by the
that
investment
doesn't matter to
committee.
me. I guess some employee preference would matter there. But I think that there's no need to offer additional compensation for whichever one is managing the Goalmaker.
So the question,
Well, and maybe one additional comment there. When we take these over, Soltis takes full responsibility and all of the liability for managing those portfolios. And so part of the value, part of the fee that we charge is because, very candidly, in our insurance liability, in our premiums, we pay additional for that because we take on additional liability. And then second part of that fee is if we can drive greater value to your participants with better returns, then that's part of that fee. And it's a 0.06% fee. So this is a very minimal fee for participant. For example, a person with $10,000 in their account, they'd pay a fee of about $60 to us.
Charged only to those who are in Goal
Only
Maker?
to those
Yes.
that are in Goal Maker. So the fee only applies to those that opt into it. And they can opt in and out of Goal Maker at any time. So if they decide they want to be out of it, they opt out, that fee no longer applies.
Appreciate that clarification. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So with that, Ralph, are you planning on doing some sort of educational campaign with this for the participants so they understand what's in it? Because I think a lot of times we talk about it here, then it passes, and I don't know if it actually gets down to where, you know, the county employees even know it's there, or some know and some don't. And so I was just wondering, you know, if there's plans to do that and what those plans may be.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And yes is the answer. You know, Soltis would plan to help us with that. We would send, you know, the communication out to all the employees who are in the plan. We'd also let those know that who are currently using that functionality to know that they could opt out if they chose to, because there will be a fee going forward. So that's an important piece.
Yeah.
I do think, and again, you know, the committee felt, you know, strongly that this would add value for employees as far as having this active management of their asset allocations. Again, again, you know, that is, you know, the opinion of that, you know, group of employees who made that choice. But I think because employees do have the choice to opt in or out, and that's the only ones who are charged, I think it's an okay way to go forward, and that it would, you know, provide some value.
And Ralph, when we roll this, is there going to be, are they automatically enrolled if they opt in, or are we going to upfront give, how are you gonna handle that?
Yeah, excellent question. There is
You know,
not
I
actually.
just wanna make sure that, you know, it's not one of those things that everybody's automatically enrolled unless they opt out. You know, how are we going to make sure that we're giving them that choice?
No, they actually have to, it's something, you know, they have to actively do themselves, you know, to enroll in this, you know, feature of the plan. It's not something that's automatically done to any employee.
Okay, because that, my biggest concern with it is just making sure there's the flexibility that the employees who like it, want it, can opt in, and those who don't can stay out.
Yeah,
So that was kind of my biggest concern with it, was making sure there was the flexibility for the employees to choose.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. They need to have that flexibility to opt in or out at any time. Any other questions?
And Ralph, I just
Oh,
add
go
for the
ahead, Tom.
commissioners, Soltis is prepared for those that are in Goal Maker and for the plan participants to offer a one-on-one consultation to help walk them through and if they have any questions and go through it. So we have our team that, you know, we're there once a month already, but this would be in addition to that in terms of trying to be and help make sure we communicate. So I think Ralph said it well. We would absolutely want to be part of trying to be very proactive in communicating to your employees that of these changes. And at the end of the day, I think we feel confident that we can really help there. As I mentioned in those exhibits, if you look, I mean, if we look at the time periods, the portfolios as we've run them, we've outperformed 31 out of 35 times versus the Prudential portfolios. And again, if we look at a 1, 3, and 5 year number, we're looking at more than $1 million of excess performance that would be in your participants' accounts, kind of based on the historical type of asset management we've been able to do with plans at Prudential with this service.
Okay, any other questions for myself or Tyler?
None.
Motion. I'll make a motion that we approve and authorize the commission to execute the amendment to the agreement as stated, number 8.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item number 8. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Aye. That passes 2-1. Okay, I think we're to item 14. I think that this is,
Bill, which is,
yeah, Commissioner Lee, you put this on the agenda.
Yes, we have worked through this for quite some time, and there's been some development agreement that has been worked out between, well, all three groups have been involved in it and given some input to it, and this is to deal with the road up there in Hobble Creek area and up there by the cottages. And so we have the development agreements in place, as we instructed them to do, is to come forward with that and work on that, find some consensus with it. Ultimately, we would be taking over a road, and then between the cottages and Route 66, the developer in this case, they'd be working on improving that road, and getting it to the point to where the public works, feels comfortable with it, and also it would alleviate some of the problems that are up there. And this is where we're at. We have this development agreement in place. There's two of them on the agenda. The one was and Rob's not here. Is he on the line, or is he? He's on the line. Okay.
I know there's concerns about the trees.
Yeah, there's some concerns about that. Rob mentioned that to me as well, that there's some trees there. I've talked about that with Richard, just kind of getting his observation on it. He brings out kind of a good point with the trees and the fences, that obviously it's our preference to have the trees and the fences out of the right of way. In case of accidents and so forth, maybe I'll let him speak to kind of his observation with that. But I think this in the way of the water issues, there was a lot of that was tied to it, not necessarily straight to it, but it does tie into it. They'll be getting that off the road instead of going down through the upper area, which gave some consternation there. It's gone from multiple development down to 6, down to now 3. And of course, that's where we're at with these agreements. But you're correct, Commissioner. There's some trees and there's some a fence. I can't remember how long that fence is. A couple hundred feet, I think, maybe longer than that. That are within 5 feet of the road itself.
There's a number of red lines in this document. So those represent the comments of, I don't think those represent the comments of the county. I think those are still, so there's kind of a developer agreement, and then there's comments from the HOA. Is that right?
Right, and it is. And then Rob, if you're on the line too, chime in on it. There's he has had a chance to look at the agreement that the cottages and Route 66 has brought forward. But you're correct.
Okay.
So this is Rob Moore, County Attorney's Office. If you want me to respond, I did send the three of you an email. There are some concerns that I had after discussing it with staff on some of the provisions that were redlined by the cottages / Richard White and their legal counsel, I'm assuming, particularly related to leaving the fence and the trees within the right-of-way, which in my position, and I think the position of some of the staff in the county, increases the potential liability of Utah County upon taking this road. Just an example, for if a car was driving down the road, driving downhill, and slides off the road and hits one of those trees or a fence and causes damage or even death, the county would be liable for that potentially. If we were to move those fences and trees out of the right of way, then there's more room if a slide off occurs. That's one of the concerns. That's just one example. I mean, you could think of others. Also, the other concern, which I appreciate Bryce reminding me of this, is that the county does not approve agreements or approve subdivisions that create a dead-end road, and arguably this would do that. So the development agreement would have to be modified, that the road would have to be created or deeded to the county prior to approval of any subdivision. We did that with Robert Stevens and his what he called Miracle Road out there in the county. So we have precedence of doing it that way. And so my suggestion is we would revise it to do that way in this one. Finally, I did also express concern about removing the provision that the HOA agrees to this agreement and would not continue to, I guess, fight it. And we agree to the approval of the subdivision. But I think the problem here is if you have this agreement, but they can still contest the subdivision. That seems to be problematic as it relates to the outcome of this development agreement. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. But the other red lines that were proposed, besides the ones I highlighted in my comments to the three of you, I don't have a problem with the other red lines. But only just the ones I highlighted is the ones that I expressed concerns about. Any questions for me?
I guess I'll make a comment. It just seems like we've got still a lot of work to do here. There's still a lot of red on this document, certainly more than I think is reasonable for us to expect to get through and have a vote on in this meeting. And so, you know, perhaps this represents some incremental progress, and that can be kind of
Hi, guys.
continued.
Hi, Blake. And is your name Quinn? Quinn.
Is that you, Rob?
That is not me.
Okay.
That is not me.
I thought you were on mute playing with someone. You know, you get your friends over.
No, I am not. And that's, I don't have my background either.
So, but there's what, a fundamental issue that I saw, because some of these things I do think that there's like some hope that you can just work through these. One fundamental issue is this comment here: county agrees to disallow any public parking on and along the drive. And, you know, I think this goes back. I've been hesitant to, and I'm sympathetic to the plight that Richard's in, and I know they're just trying to work out something, but I've been hesitant for government to get involved here. I actually think all of us would probably say that, and it's only feeling like it's the last resort that's getting government involved. And so, but by asking this to be a county road, but they still want it to be, this statement to me kind of shows they want a county road so they can get the development figured out, but they still want it to be a private road. And those two things they're incongruous.
And my comment also included that, I failed to mention that, this is Rob Moore again, Utah County Attorney's Office. I think Richard really expressed some concerns that if he's there, he could address it. But we don't have any restrictions typically on our roads. And that provision would seemingly require the county sheriff's office to patrol that area, which I don't think we can guarantee that would actually occur and enforce it.
Do you see that as a major issue? I don't know if that's
I
a
was
major issue or
wishing the
not.
sheriff or someone from the sheriff's office was here to speak to that.
Richard Nelson, Public Works Director. Commissioner Lee and Rob have both kind of expressed what my thoughts are on the fence and the trees. Commissioner Raines, you talked about the public parking. That's another one of my concerns as well. In that same section, under the county's responsibility 3.1, says the county also agrees not to remove trees and fencing along Cottage Drive unless the county determines it's necessary to widen it by 6 feet or more. So not only are we saying they don't have to take the trees out, but it's basically tying the hands of the county to be able to go remove those trees if we needed to, which is a concern to me that for the reasons stated by Mr. Moore. So I think that it is probably something we need to have some further discussion on. Those are the three concerns from Public Works are the trees, the fence, and the parking availability.
Sure. I guess we can have some public comment.
Thank you. Dion Barron. I live in the cottages. I talked to the sheriff's department about parking if it's in an unsafe place. He knew right where I meant. He said there's no problem. They would be glad to enforce that if there were no parking signs. So that problem that just came up isn't a problem for the sheriff's department.
Well, I'll still say that it's a concern of mine because
Okay.
it still is saying, like, why do you want it to be a county road if there can't be?
It's not a public, we're not trying to be anti-public. It's where the roads are tight corners, and if they park, it will obstruct snow removal, and it would just create problems. We're not at all trying to stop a public access at all. It's for
You
safety.
just want there to be some areas where it would be unsafe for parking.
That's right. If there's a safe place if you come out or the sheriff's department came out, we have no problem with that. So, and the other thing in addressing the trees and the fence, Richard will show you pictures, but the county road, the Canyon Road, has 100 times more traffic on it coming up and down. And there are trees that are 6 inches from the blacktop or a foot, or he has pictures of 2 feet, and fences along there. And so where our trees and fence are, it's a steep incline that goes down. And I can give you the names of people that if those trees weren't there, they would have rolled down an incline. So there is safety and an erosion barrier. If there's a time that the county wants to widen that road, it would have to be at a time when you're doing the Canyon Road. I mean, because we're the same width, and they have a lot more traffic. At a time when you don't need to widen it, and we have a safety barrier for erosion and safety, let's not cut them down now, and that's our issue. We're not at all against improvements later, development later. We're not fighting any of that. We just want to be reasonable now. Let's not create a problem where now we have to bring up a different kind of barrier. The trees are there and they're working, and they're far removed more than trees and fences on the main Canyon Road. Richard has pictures if you have questions too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also, Commissioner Lee, I think we mentioned this. There's just one issue that I would want to bring up, and it's on.
See that, it was in 14, was it?
Yeah.
And I anticipate that we've got some more massaging that needs to go on.
Absolutely. This is kind of like an agreement for an agreement.
If you want to, just point that out, that would be great to just point out at this point.
Yeah. It states something to the effect that if there is a remedy in the future, the county has a remedy and Richard White has a remedy. All 3 parties of this should have a remedy if there's a problem going forward. I think that was just an oversight. I don't think that's anything unusual.
It states all 3 and then just states the 2 afterwards. And
Right. And so we would just want to be included in that. I think that's just was an oversight. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any more comment? Okay.
Richard White. So I would agree. There are red lines. So we got the original version of this, which I know that Robert Moore worked on. I don't know if he specifically, but his office worked on it, and he did talk to both us and the cottages to get what should be in there. And I think that he did a fairly good job. But there were some things in there that neither us or the cottages could agree on in the end. And because of that, that's why we marked those up and sent those back. And so we understand that there's some massaging that needs to be done with that. I think right now we're looking for a vote of basically good faith, negotiations that we're going to be able to come to an agreement if we can all agree upon a final document. Is kind of where we're trying to go with this. That we understand that it's not gonna, the final agreement's not gonna look like this, but we need to be able to get to that point, and looking for basically 2 votes to be able to get to that, to be able to move forward and get to that final final document that we can all agree upon. And then in regards to the fences and the trees, Tanner, have you ever been up there to this road specifically? Okay, so there, and Commissioner Ivy, have you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and I know you have, Commissioner Lee. So there's the majority of it, so the very beginning and the very top of it, there's really not a safety issue on either side of the road. But the middle section, and actually the majority of the road, has a steep incline on one side and then a sharp hillside on the other side. You know, that's indicative of the canyon. Quite a bit of the road, not quite a bit, but a lot of the road is like that up there. And so during, you know, in that section, we view those trees as more of a help than a hindrance. Like Dion said, you know, there's been times where people have gone off the road there and those trees have stopped them from rolling down the hill. We don't see those as, you know, even if they're within 6 feet, as a hindrance, more of a help. Because if they weren't there, then some kind of barrier would need to be put up. Well, to us, you know, trees are a lot more beautiful than a rail on there, but they do, you know, similar things, prevent you from going down the hill. And then along with and to go with that, if you drive up the canyon, there's a lot of trees within 6 feet of the road that are there and have been there for years. So, you know, one comment would be, why hasn't the county removed those trees if they're really that big of a deal? Because I understand that, you know, if all the trees were removed 6 feet back in the whole rest of the canyon, I could see that argument as, you know, holding some water. And I'd agree that it's, you know, more hazardous to have them there. But why haven't the other trees that have been there for a lot of years, why haven't they been removed? May I approach and give you some of these pictures? As you look through these, and you can just pass them down when you're done with them, but as you look through them, there's either pictures of trees and or fences that are within 5 feet of the road. And these are not, the very last picture is one of the cottage's fence where they've got sporadic trees. The trees are more than 6 feet away at that point, and so those are really not an issue. The fence is at 5 foot, and that's what, you know, Glenn Tanner and Robert Moore have got an issue with. The rest of those, there's trees that have been there for years, you know, anywhere from 6 inches to a foot in diameter. And some of them are within 2 feet of the road. There's a fence post in there that you see there that's been there for more than 40 years, that's 9 inches away from the asphalt. And a fence, the same fence that's with that, that's been there for, that's within 2 feet of the road. And they've been there for many years. And so our question is, you know, if it's really that big of a deal, why haven't the other trees and fences been moved if we're going to make this big of a deal about it? And that's just my comments.
And that might be a fair point. I think we're not going to get to any action today, right? It's just going to have to, you can keep working on it. We'll come to agenda another time. I do think, for me, when you ask that type of rhetorical question, I understand where you're going with it. I think it makes some sense. But that's the challenge, I think, with getting government involved, right? Is if this was a private road, this isn't the conversation. But because we're coming in, you know, regardless of what is kind of common practice, I think that obviously our civil attorneys are going to look at code, and they're going to look at what's being transferred to the county and try to make sure that it's compliant with code. And so it's hopefully there's a reasonable work out there, but I don't think it's just because there are some instances of non-compliance out there doesn't mean that our office shouldn't kind of focus on making sure that this newly acquired county road would be compliant. So, but I hear your point. I think hopefully this can get worked out, but it sounds like there's more work to do there.
And I agree, and I think what we're looking for is a vote of, you know, some kind of vote to from the county commission that, you know, would give the ability for the county attorney's office in conjunction with you, the county commission, to work out an agreement. Because right now, if we use up all the time of the county attorney's office and ultimately it's just, you know, decided not to do it, I you know, we would rather be able to have that, knowing that the county's going to put a good faith effort in. The cottages and us are, willing to put that good faith effort in, and would like to, see that, more of an action from the commission. So, thank you.
Thank you.
For me, I'm happy to get behind this. There's obviously a couple of the provisions that I think we need to iron out the details on. And so, I mean, that's typically speaking, I'd look to the other commissioners. I would think we can give Rob some direction to make those modifications, send it to the parties, and then bring it back.
And I would concur with that. I mean, it's not really an action, but it is a direction.
Right.
And if we're directing Rob, like you're saying, to continue going forward and ironing out some of these things, I think we can get there.
And so,
Commissioners, this is Rob Moore again. One option could be, and by the way, the difference between this road and those other roads is this is a new road we'd be accepting versus an old road. But one option would be potentially to have the cottages, the HOA, or Richard White or both indemnify the county so long as the trees and fences are in the right-of-way. I mean, that's one option just to think about as we move forward.
Sure, I think that should be considered too. Absolutely.
and so, again, my comment, I'm going to make a motion to continue, but my comment is that given the dialogue today, I think, Rob, you have some support and understanding from us on the modifications to the current red line documents we'd like to see, that you can coordinate with the applicants on, and we can hopefully then bring it back once we've kind of ironed those out. So with that, I'd make a motion to continue regular agenda item number 14 to our next regular commission meeting.
Is that enough time?
Rob, does that work? 2 weeks?
Maybe a little bit later than that, I think.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to delay this by any means. I just, with the COVID stuff I've been doing and the other things, it's a little tight.
So 2 commission
The
meetings.
29th?
Sure.
Okay, I'll move that
Absolutely.
we continue regular agenda item number 14 till July 29th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to continue item 14. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. That passes 3-0. Let's see. Do we need closed meetings?
We have litigation, right? We have to,
It was a suggestion that we set a litigation closed meeting for July 9th at 1 o'clock. Right
Okay.
here.
and none
Okay,
of
July
them-
9th, not July 2nd. Is
That's
that
my,
right?
that's my understanding.
July 9th at 1 o'clock? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we strike agenda items 15, 16, and 17.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to strike 15, 16, and 17. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0.
I'll make a motion that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting to discuss pending or reasonable imminent litigation on July 9th at 1 o'clock in this building. Which room? This room?
This room, yeah, chambers.
Okay, in this room.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to set the closed meeting for 18 at the time and location as stated. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Okay. We now move into a work session. Commissioner Lee.
Yes, in talking with Ralph, Ralph wanted to bring this up in a work session, and I concurred with him on that to talk about mosquito abatement, and to talk specifically about the drone program, which was a test program last year, which this year they want to add to, and it seems like it'd be reasonable for us, since last year we had a pretty lengthy discussion on what that mosquito abatement program was looking at, to see if we're in the same situation, and this would of course be before we have an opportunity to look at the amendment and the contract that's on the agenda.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. And I appreciate your time, commissioners, and we'll try not to take too much of the time. I'll leave most of the time to Dan Miller, who's our mosquito abatement director, again, Ralph Clegg with the health department. As you mentioned, last year we were pleased with the commissioners approved us to use some funding to experiment with the drone, and which allows us to get into areas we can't get into with vehicles, and we can't really air spray. And we've had a lot of success with that. Now, unfortunately, we weren't able to build that into the next year's budget because we're still evaluating it before the next year's budget was due. And so Dan will talk a little bit about the success of that program and what he'd like to see us be able to do. So, and the cost for that, Dan.
Thank you. It's great to be with you and appreciate all the service that you render and your support that you give to us. Last year, we were able to treat some acreage specifically in an area up in the northern part of the county along Utah Lake, in which we were able to, the only other way to get to it was through an airplane. We were able to treat it with the drone through the contract that we had found, and it significantly reduced the number of actual air sprays that we had to do. And from that point, it's actually kept it low. As we started this year, we had part of it, a contract, but what we've discovered is that we're finding more and more acreage in which we could use the drone in that would indeed give us better coverage. For example, there's a place in Springville that a gentleman always flood irrigates, probably 30, 40 acres, maybe even more than that. And it's always been habitual. Every week we're down there treating and putting man hours and chemicals in, and we're able to do that same kind of treatment in less than an hour. And we don't just go treat because we think it might be there. We won't treat any area until we find larval sampling. And then we go back the next day. We were getting 10 to 15 a dip, and we went back the next day and we had none. We checked it every week, and it wasn't until 3 or 4 weeks later till it started building back up, and then we could go back in and do that with the drone again. It saves significant amount of costs in the work that we do, both in man hours and in chemical costs because of the effectiveness of it, and we don't have to bring in an airplane, which is significantly a lot more money to do that. And so it's been a very useful tool for us. Now, we budgeted for the limited acreage that we had. We'd like to be able to do more acreage this year because it's been so effective, and we'll need to purchase some more chemical because we're using a different, instead of using the Bechtel back, we use a Bechtel Max, which has a long-term effect and also is really pointed towards the Culex mosquitoes, which is the vector for West Nile.
So how much in total is budgeted?
We budgeted, let's see, I think around it was around $7,800 for the drone, and then we purchased the chemicals that would deal with that. I think it was 100 acres. What we'd like to do is increase that to $10,000 so that we can fly more acreage, and I think that's another 100 acres. And then we need about $18,000 more to buy the chemical, the Vectobac or Max, to be able to have enough to treat the areas that we're asking for.
So the question on the chemical though, I mean, you're purchasing chemical now and have budget for chemical. So why doesn't the chemical wash if you're purchasing it?
Because we'd already purchased it. We'd purchased the chemical for the plane. We already have it. Anticipating the need that we would have when we got to January, February, we bought that, and it actually wound up being quite fortuitous. I didn't know that we were going to have a pandemic, but much of the chemical that we had purchased prior to the pandemic, we can't get anymore. There's a back order on it. They're not manufacturing it. And so consequently, we had supplied, but the dibrome that we use for the airplane isn't the same chemical. It's an adulticide. What we're using is a larvicide. And so we need to purchase some more of that larvicide. And that, I understand the wash, but the dibrome will carry over. And so in the next budget year, we may not need to purchase as much because we won't use as much. And it carries over. We have a shelf life of that to be able to use it in the years to come. Does that answer the question?
And is any of the area being sprayed with this the area that's kind of infested with Phragmites along Utah Lake?
Yes, it is. In fact, that the area that we're treating is infected with. It has the Phragmites. It has sometimes the cottonwoods. It's not just along the edge of Utah Lake. It's in many of the places there. The chemical's heavy enough. It's a granule, and so it's able to fall down through that and get to the water. And so that's one of the other things that's been much more effective. Where you get Phragmites, it's 10 or 12 feet high. We can't walk through it. I don't know if you've ever gone and walked through some of that. I have, and you don't know which way to go. Literally, you have no orientation unless there's a path coming back out. You're not going to find your way out. So it makes it almost impossible to treat it how we've done it in the past by hand, and we can't really get an ATV into it. And so this became a way in which we can fly over areas which we cannot walk in, we can't put vehicles in, but allows us to be able to treat it. We've looked at the idea of buying a drone, purchasing one and doing that, but the cost of, first of all, buying the drone, secondly, of licensing a pilot that we hire and have on staff, being a seasonal person, that means we're repeating that every 2 to 3 years, was really cost prohibitive. And so this became a much more cost-effective way where it's just like we're doing with the airplane. We lease the service, they come in, they do the work, they're taking the liability for all of that work. They have all the licensing they need to do it. They fly all of the flight plans when we're flying around the airport or those kinds of things. And we're able just to be there. We provide the chemical. We help them load it. We witness what they do, how he puts it in, and then he reports back. So it's been really effective.
It makes me wonder about, there are some other proposals. It seems like we are treating a problem and never really solving it, when it comes to these Phragmites. And so if there's even if it's a larger scale solution, if there's something that can really help remove these Phragmites,
right,
then that might take away this.
Well, removal of the Phragmites will not remove the mosquito habitat. The removal of the Phragmites will indeed be what it should be and what was there before were the bulrushes and the other cattails, the other kind of more native aquatic environment or plants. Phragmites is just this invasive species that have come in. Removal of them the mosquito habitat will always be there. It's just the nature of the lake edge. It's the nature of how we live. It's the same issue with the midge flies. It's the same issue with everything there. It's just part of the ambiance of living next to Utah Lake. One of the greatest dilemmas we're facing is the fact that in areas that we used to have as a buffer zone between human population and the mosquito population, people are building in. They're creating subdivisions and houses, schools, all kinds of things, recreational areas, parks, soccer fields, which then create an issue for us because we don't have this zone that says we're going to keep everything at bay to this side by going in and treating it. And now they're living in it, and so now we have to kind of come up with a way to treat it and work with it. And that's one of the biggest challenges we're facing. It causes them to call us. We're spending a lot of time educating and working with people. I work with Vineyard and Saratoga Springs. I've worked with Lehigh. I'm talking to those people, to the communities. Saratoga Springs blew up a couple of weeks ago because they had a HOA meeting and they told everyone to send a request into mosquito abatement about mosquitoes, and this was in March. And we had 100 emails within a 3-hour period of time, and my phone is connected to my email account, so I'm accessible. And about 1 o'clock in the morning, it's blowing up. So fortunately, it was on vibrate, not on ding. But
which I do think that is going to continue.
Yeah, it will.
Because it's not so much development. There's been some of that, but really the lake shore is pretty well protected from any commercial or residential development.
Right.
But in terms of cities and the state trying to give greater access to our residents and really embrace the lake as an opportunity for recreation and
Right.
building in parks and amenities, I think that's going to continue
Yeah, and I
over the next few years.
agree. And because of that, and what we did is we reached back out to them, every one of them, and we explained to them what they were seeing in March, and April was not a mosquito. It was a midge fly. And I brought that up just to help you understand. I'm doing all that I possibly can to educate the people around Utah Lake. Now, when we spray at night, do we kill midge flies? Yeah, they're out flying, we kill them. But the massive numbers that are coming off that lake are, it's just a small portion of what's available to them. But we work hard to educate them, very hard.
And part of this, the Phragmites part of it is just just a part, because I
Yeah.
think as you're talking and as you've explained to me on it, this drone allows you to get into areas where you can't fly in with a plane.
Yes.
And you can't necessarily get in by foot. And because you might be right up next to some homes and development, you can't be flying a plane right past them, buzzing them.
Yeah,
And it
no
might
one
be
wants to
hard-
have dibrome,
Yeah, it might
an
be hard for
organophosphate
somebody-
dumped on their house.
Right,
In their
right.
car and anything else like that. And we
Overspray.
have to get that close.
Right.
So
So-
this allows us to treat surgically, very directed. We can very easily go in and treat as a 5-acre spot, a 3-acre spot. We can target the areas that we're trying to reach and not have this massive amount. Now, we're going to still have to use an airplane because there are areas around Provo Bay and down along, those areas on the Lincoln Beach, those kinds of places. We're going to have to use a plane. There are tens of thousands of acres, and we would expend our entire budget just treating that once with a larvicide. So we use the plane. So we're trying to use the most effective tool we have to be able to keep the mosquitoes at bay and really to protect the public.
Can you also speak to, I notice in here this has been, signed out from the purchasing department as sole source.
Yes.
And I think it's important for us to, kind of document through in a public meeting why this is a sole source. Because the last thing we want is, somebody to say, hey, I do this all the time, over here or over there. So can you kind of tell us the process you went through?
The process I went through is we've been looking at this for couple of years. There are vendors that will sell you drones. And every vendor and everyone I've approached about the drones, they want to sell you a drone. They're anywhere between $15,000 and $20,000 to buy the one drone. They always tell you buy two because you're going to crash one. And then you have to go through the licensing process and the piloting. There is no other person that I can find within geographically, within Utah even, that is saying we're going to do this kind of work. And I did find this individual, really found him because he was up treating the DWR. He was working for them, and it was treating some land in Springville, flying his drone, and we said, can we contact you? And he said, sure. That's how we found him, because we were really looking seriously at trying to do this. And so,
An interesting point, because if he's done work for DWR,
yeah.
then wouldn't there be a state contract?
No, and actually this is the issue about it. He was working for them as a seasonal employee and had the drone as part of his own personal life. And expanding into a business, and they were allowing him to do some experimental treatment with his drone.
Well, and the point.
So he wasn't. That's how it was working. It wasn't a state contract or anything like that.
I mean, it's new, and the reason why I wanted to just make sure and say that on a public basis is because if there is anybody out there that does this, already,
Please
then
bring them on.
We'd like to see what you can do.
Absolutely.
But we don't, and as far as we know right now, this is the only guy.
Yeah, that is, and
that's why I wanted to make sure that was pointed out.
And I attend the American Mosquito Control Conference annually. I'm always looking for and trying to find the best tools that we possibly can. It's not that I'm not gone out there and looked even on a national basis. So most of the places right now, Salt Lake City Mosquito Abatement has purchased their own drone. Davis County Mosquito Abatement, they purchased theirs, but they crashed it last year, and now they haven't replaced it. And so there's a lot looking at the idea of using it. This I felt was the best fit for us. And so yeah, it's costing us a little more money, but boy, I think in the return, it's there. Last year we trapped, and weather's a factor. I want you to understand that I think that our cooler weather has made a difference, a significant difference. But last year to this date, on this week of trapping, we trapped 13,000 mosquitoes. We have one more trap to bring in tomorrow. We trapped 750 this week. Factor of is going to be weather, but another factor is we've done a lot more larval work with what time we have with the drone, and I think we're reducing some of those areas. Now, when it heats up, it could explode on us. And so that's why I kind of have the air stuff setting aside and some other things ready to go if we need to do it. The last thing I want to have happen is this get really hot for 3 or 4 weeks, and all of a sudden the West Nile virus becomes viral and be able to hit into the human population. We don't need one more thing to add to everything that we're dealing with at this point. And I told my employees yesterday, we cannot be anything but less than vigilant, because we just don't need to throw one more thing into the mix. And last year numbers were low. The year before they were relatively high as far as the number of West Nile cases and then horses and different things. So we monitor all of that. And again, it's variable, but I think the drone's going to really help us be able to really target those areas. The other thing I would share with you is that the Culex mosquito, which is the one that carries West Nile, in the traps right now is between 90 and 95% of them. It's not the flood water, it's the Culex permanent water things. And that's really what we're targeting with this drone, is we're able to target that permanent water along the lake edge in different places where we could never do that before, and I hope it makes a difference. Again, no guarantees, but I do keep track of data, and in a year I'll be able to tell you what we've discovered.
Well, thank you. And from our conversation last year, I've got a big bowl for the dog, bowl of water. But every morning I go out there and I dump it out.
Good.
And I refill it, just because of that conversation we had last year on how fast those things can multiply.
Yeah, 72 hours from egg to adult
Yeah.
in hot temperature, and it just takes a simple, small tuna fish can filling with water.
Right.
My wife got a little ornamental pond that she set on her porch, and I continually run it, and I put new water in it every day. Okay, so thank you. Any questions you have for us? We appreciate being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I think a final motion would be in order.
You tabled an item.
The table?
Yeah, to take it off.
I'll make a motion that we bring back onto the table number 2 from our published regular agenda.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to untable item number 2. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes 3-0.
Make a motion that we approve and authorize the signing of the amendment as stated in number 2 on our published regular agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve item number 2. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes 3-0. Final motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We're adjourned.
Alice?